Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami
Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki jai, Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Ganga Mahi ki jai, Yamuna ki jai, Tulsi Devi ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Transcendental ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samavita Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the Son of the Lord.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the Son of the
Hare
Lord.
Krishna.
All glories to the Son of the Lord.
Hare Krishna.
All glory to Shri Guru and
Guru.
Lotus feet.
Spiritual Master, and the only way in which we can attain your devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor and the Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, please be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. We take the shelter of your lotus feet.
Shri Prabhupada ki
Jai.
jai. I can see it. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja
Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari
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 Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari
Yasodandana Vrajana Ranjana
Yashodandana
Yasodandana Vrajana Ranjana Yasodandana Vrajana Ranjana Yasodandana Vrajana Ranjana Jangatira Vanachari Jangatira Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki
Jai.
Antaraj srimadbhagavatam Ki
Jai.
Samaveda Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki
Jai.
Gaur Premanandi.
Jai.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to Shishi Guru and Gauranga.
Jai.
Glories
Guru
to Srila
Gauranga.
Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Need to hear the explanation of devotional service given by Lord Kapila Dev in the 3rd canto, 29th chapter. Today is text number 9. Vishayan abhisandhaya
Vishayan Sandhaya.
Yasha aishvaryameva va
Aishvaryameva va.
Archadha vachayeyo mam
Archadha
Sarajasaha
Bhava Sarajasaha
Vishayana Visandhaya
Vishayana Visandhaya
Yasha Aishvaryameva Va
Yasha Aishvaryameva Va
Archadha Vachayeyo Ma
Archana Vachayeyo Mam
Pritag Bhava Sarajasaha
Bhava Sarajasaha
Vishayan Abhisandhaya
Vishayana Visandhaya
Yasha Aishvaryameva Va
Yasha Aishvaryameva Va
Archada Vachayeyo Mam
Archana Vachayeyo Mam
Pritagambhava Sarajasaha
Pritagambhava Sarajasaha
Vishayan Abhisandhaya
Vishayan Visandhaya
Yasha Aishvaryam Eva Va
Yasha Aishvaryameva Va
Archadav Archiyeyo Mam
Archaya Vachayeyo Mam
Pritagambhava Sarajasaha
Pritagambhava Sarajasaha
Vishayana Visandhaya
Vishayana Visandhaya
Visha Aishvaryameva Va
Yasha Aishvaryameva Va
Archadavarchayeyo Mam
Archana Vachayeyo Mam
Pritagambhava Sarajasaha
Pritagambhava Sarajasaha
Vishayana Pisandaya
Vishayana Visandhaya
Yasha Aishvaryam Eva Va
Yasha Aishvaryameva Va
Archanda Varchayeyo Mam
Archana Vachayeyo Mam
Pritagambhava Sarajasaha
Pritagambhava Sarajasaha
Synonyms. Vishayan,
Vishayan
sense objects.
sense objects
Abhisandhaya,
Abhisandhaya
aiming at.
aiming at
Yasha,
Yasha
fame.
fame
Aishvaryam,
Aishvaryam
opulence.
opulence
Eva,
Eva
indeed.
indeed
Va,
Va
or.
or
Archa, adhau,
Archana
in worship of the deity and so on.
in worship of the deity and so on
Archaye,
Archaye
may worship.
may we worship
Yaha,
Yaha
he who.
he who
Ma,
Mam
me.
me
Pritak bhava,
Pritagambhava
a separatist.
is a separatist
Saha,
Saha
he.
he
Rajasaha,
Rajasaha
in the mode of passion.
in the mode of passion yeah you should be
Thank you. Okie dokies. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The worship of deities in the temple by a separatist with a motive for material enjoyment, fame, and opulence is devotion in the mode of passion. Please repeat. The worship of the deities in the temple
the worship of the deities in the temple
by a separatist
by a separatist
with a motive for material enjoyment,
with a motive for material enjoyment
fame, and opulence
fame and opulence
is devotion in the mode of passion.
is devotion in the mode of passion.
Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
The word separatist must be understood carefully. The Sanskrit words in this connection are binadrik, that was from yesterday's verse, binadrik, and pritagambhava. Sanskrit words in this connection are binadrik and pritagambhava. A separatist is one who sees his interest as separate from that of the Supreme Lord. Mixed devotees or devotees in the mode of passion and ignorance think that the interest of the Supreme Lord is supplying the orders of the devotee. The interest of such devotees is to draw from the Lord as much as possible for their sense gratification. This is the separatist mentality. Actually, pure devotion is explained in the previous chapter. The mind of the Supreme Lord and the mind of the devotee should be dovetailed. A devotee should not wish anything but to execute the desire of the Supreme. That is oneness. When the devotee has an interest or will different from the interest of the Supreme Lord, his mentality is that of a separatist. When the so-called devotee desires material enjoyment without reference to the interests of the Supreme Lord, or he wants to become famous or opulent by utilizing the mercy or grace of the Supreme Lord, he's in the mode of passion. Mayavadis, however, interpret this word separatist in a different way. They say that while worshiping the Lord, one should think himself one with the Supreme Lord. This is another adulterated form of devotion within the modes of material nature. The conception that the living entity is one with the Supreme is in the mode of ignorance. Oneness is actually based on oneness of interest. A pure devotee has no interest but to act on behalf of the Supreme Lord. When one has even a tinge of personal interest, his devotion is mixed with the three modes of material nature. We could pray for the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the previous acharyas. Hopefully some transcendental vibration can come out of this wooden tongue and enter into your ears. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyanjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sasha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Shiva Shakam Vitam Sasha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabamando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Kanta Mosate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishavana Sudevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakopatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Evacha Padidana Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Could we do one more Maha Mantra for those of our Prabhus whose bodies just aren't cooperating? It's like disease, old age, mental anxieties. I mean, we might all get the benefit of this Maha, but if we could chant loudly, I would like to mention, I always think of my dear friend Yudhishthira, who's being kicked ferociously by the mercy of the Lord. I know he is having challenges, so we pray in this mantra for him. And Bhakta Larry, unexpectedly, tragically, his sister passed away a couple of days ago. So we can chant one Maha Mantra for the mercy upon all the people mentioned and all those who should have been mentioned. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I didn't expect to be giving class today. I can say that I do have some realization about being a separatist and engaging in devotional service under the whips of the mode of ignorance and passion. I have pretty good realization on these things, and that's why yesterday and today I will try to focus my consciousness and my prayers on the glorification of pure devotional service. These things have to be understood properly. What pure devotional service is not, so that we don't become confused or cheated, misled into accepting something that isn't pure devotional service. Srila Prabhupada came to give us pure devotional service. He's come to give us Krishna praying, nothing short. If we can't accept it due to our foolishness, then what can he do? But he's come to give that to one and all. This type of verse should be glorified or spoken upon by a devotee of the caliber of Jayadeva Goswami, a Mahabhagavad. He and his wife Padmavati, they lived in Navadvip, in Champakahata. He wrote the prayer that we sing every morning. Namaste Narasimhaya. This is from the Das Avatar Stotram, glorifying 10 avatars of the Lord, and the Shingadev being one of them. He wrote the Gita Govinda. The only way he could have written Gita Govinda, which is about the intimate pastimes, loving reciprocations between Radha and Krishna, is that Lord Chaitanya personally entered into his heart and gave him the inspiration and the realization. Because as Scripture says, before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu invented, specifically Madhavinda Puri, invented the concept, the realization, the manifestation of that ujjvala, how does that go? Bhakti, that shining, soft, golden devotion of conjugal reciprocation with the Lord was not manifest. Wasn't manifest in Brahma's Sampradaya, in Madhva's Sampradaya, or any other. Not of the nature to the degree as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and presented it. Madhavinda Puri, the guru of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's guru, he was the seed, we can say. He understood. He was blessed, being a desire tree from grove in Vrindavan, manifest, incarnated to bring down this, set up the field for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's gift to one and all. Jayadeva Goswami, he wrote Gita Govinda. To this very day, for some hundreds of years, they have been chanting Gita Govinda daily for Lord Jagannath's pleasure. It's the last thing he listens to before taking rest, or at least the curtains close, and he engages in his transcendental pastimes with Srimati Radharani, with his most beloved.
Do they have the dancers too?
Huh?
Do they have the dancers every day?
He also wrote a play known Jagannath Natika, Vallabha Natika, Jagannath Vallabha Natika. And they do perform and did perform. He personally trained the Devadasis. That's a tradition that I understand has been given up. Ramananda Roy, I'm mixing my Mahabhagavats. He wrote the pastime and he trained the Devi Dasis to intricately express the movements and the mood, the steps, the enactment of conjugal attraction and service to Krishna. Lord Chaitanya said only he was empowered to serve the ladies to the degree that he did in preparing them, in molding them into becoming proper receptacles for that mercy and that purity to come through. But anyway, so I'll retract the play. He may have written the play, but my mind's trying to go to Ramananda Roy's play. So I will say at least Gita Govinda. And this is one of the authors that Lord Chaitanya would read in the last 18 years in Jagannath Puri, specifically in the latter part of those years, 6 years or something like that. Practically speaking, he didn't even come out to the public. He just became totally absorbed in his separation and love for Krishna. His desire was fulfilled to taste that which he came. Externally, he came to give us the Maha Mantra, which contains the seed of this Krishna praying. And personally, he wanted to taste it as Srimati Radharani tasted. As he said to the gopis, I cannot repay you for your complete surrender and service. I am unable to do so. In an attempt to understand the debt that he owed to Srimati Radharani and her assistance, he came to experience that bhav, that praying, that separation. And Jayadeva Goswami wrote about such things in Gita Govinda. In fact, he was writing one day in Mayapur there in Navadvip, Tom. And he wrote, it was when separation had been there between Radha and Krishna was feeling guilty for having caused Srimati Radharani pain. And he approached her and he placed his head upon her feet. And that's not something you do very often in the glorification of Radha Krishna pastimes. Appropriately so, because this is the material for the liberated souls. Jayadeva Goswami thought, no, this might be too much. And he scratched it out. Time to go take noon bath, come back, take prasadam, and then he would consider and continue on in writing Gita Govinda. While he was gone, he came back to the house, greeted by his wife. She said, "Boy, that was quick." He said, "Yes, I have something to write. There was a shloka I wanted to finish, and then I'll take my meals." He went in and he wrote this verse wherein Srimati Radharani's feet have Krishna's head placed upon them. And then he took prasad, and his wife honored his remnants afterwards. While she's in the midst of eating, here comes Jayadeva again. And he was very surprised. In Vedic culture, the wife would eat after the husband was satisfied. And he's saying, "What's going on?" He said, what do you mean? "I'm taking prasad." And he said, "Yeah, but I haven't taken." She goes, "What do you mean? I just served you." "Huh?" He said, "Yeah, you came back." He said, "I have a verse to write," and then you took your prasad. He went back and he saw that the Lord had written the verse. He'd appeared as Jayadeva, in the form of Jayadeva, had written the verse, confirming to Jayadeva, yes, this is appropriate. Put it in the Gita Govinda. And Jayadeva was in ecstasy, falling at the feet of his wife. He personally served Krishna. You've been honoring the remnants of Krishna. And this is just one pastime of Jayadeva and his consort. And there are others, if you want to hear more because of the time element, that I suggest you read Navadvipam Mahatmya, where Bhaktivinoda Thakur will elaborate even more. There's nectar to be had there. Pure devotional service. Does anybody know what a Paribhasa Sutra is besides Dravida Prabhu? Paribhasa Sutra. When you have a text, the scripture that you've written, there's one verse that encapsulates the essence of that scripture, and from which all other parts of the scripture should be understood. If something apparently doesn't agree with the Paribhasa Sutra, the essence of the scripture, then you understand you have to apply a different understanding than the direct meaning. Everything has to contour or comply with the meaning of the essence. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it's Ete Chamsa Kalapunsa, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. That all the incarnations, unlimited incarnations, are either expansions of the Purusha Avatar, expansions of the Lord, who comes in different ages to vanquish the enemies of Indra. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, and Bhagavatam simply elaborates on that. Every other verse is supporting that. In the Nectar Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami is the essence of it. Do you know what that verse is? Anyabilashita shunyam yana karmadya navritam anukulyena krishnanam shilanam bhakta uttama. This is the perfect, most concise explanation of what Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya have come to give us. Every single word is perfect. It's not that he was the first or only one to describe or define pure devotional service. Garuda Purana, there's one verse, and if I had known I was giving class, I would have had my reference here to read it specifically to you. But in essence, it said that activities that are meant for serving the Supreme Lord and his incarnations are the best of activities and are the natural condition of the living entity and the perfection of the living entity. That's not as perfect a definition. Sounds pretty dang good, but it's not as perfect an explanation. Or in the Narada Pancharatra, Narada Muni, he gives the Sarvapadi Vinirmuktam Tat Paratvaina Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakta Uchate verse, wherein it says that by engaging in devotional service to Krishna, the master of the senses, one has two benefits, that one's senses become purified and one becomes free from all false designations. That's perfection, serving Krishna with one's spiritual senses. Now that's another mighty fine definition of bhakti. But this Anyavilashita Shunyam is perfect. Having been empowered by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it is perfect. It is the culmination of the definition of Uttama Bhakti, pure devotional service. I was going to ask you this Uttama Gati that we say every day to Srila Prabhupada, by surrendering to his lotus feet, worship of his lotus feet, one's desires are all fulfilled. The Uttama Gati means path or goal or what is?
It's the path.
It's the path. The path of worshiping the lotus feet is the perfection of fulfilling all desires.
Yeah.
So Uttama Bhakti, it is the perfection of devotional service. Those are the last two words of the verse. And in the first, for those of you who don't know it, Anyavilashita, Shunyam, Anyavilash, material desires. The other day I couldn't find what that sentence was, but here it is. Srila Prabhupada said, actually the path of devotional service is one without a second, but according to the devotee's condition, devotional service appears in multifarious varieties. Multifarious varieties, as will be nicely explained in the following verses. Unlimited manifestations of mixed devotional service, practically speaking, because Sri Krishna says that material desires are unlimited. So Anyavilashita Shunyam, one's devotional service has to be free of material desires. Jnana, we know what that means, mental speculation. Karma, fruity desires. Karmadi, adi, it means and everything else. So he's covered everything. There's no loopholes in this. Anything outside of devotional service, and that's going to be further explained in the verse, is to be given up. Shunyam. One's devotional service should be free of it all. So the adi can include the atheistic Sankhya, or the performance of this Astanga Yoga, or the austerities, etc., etc. So many ways in which the transcendentalists or aspiring transcendentalists try to achieve perfection. But it's all meant to be anything but Uttama Bhakti, given up. And then he says, Karmadhyanabritam Anukulyena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhaktir Uttama. So, Anushilanam means activities to serve Krishna. Anukulyena means they should be done in a way in which to please Him. That was the mantra I was saying again and again. I probably said it about 12 times yesterday. Whatever we do, let's do it with the motive to please Krishna. That's the essence of pure devotional service. What's your motive? Like in a court of law, you do something to understand to what extent you did wrong or how to punish you. The motive has to be understood. Or as Rajendranandana Goswami, one purport said, to understand someone's statements, you have to understand their intent. What's the motive behind it? What are they really saying? So, Anukulyena, it has to be favorable. It has to be with the motive to please Krishna. And that's the third thing. Anukulyena Krishna. Krishnanu Shilanam. Krishna. So there's three things. The activities, Srila Prabhupada often uses the term cultivation of devotional service. All the activities. Like there's 64 items in sadhana bhakti. We're meant to embrace sadhana bhakti. The first 10 are all the dues. Not all, but they are the dues. Accept a spiritual master, take his shelter, take initiation from him, serve him, inquire from him submissively, learn how to serve the previous acharyas. First 5 of the 10, they're all dues. And then the second 10, 11 through 20, are the do-nots. How you can avoid offenses. So that yesterday we were describing the 6 symptoms of surrender. To accept that which is favorable to please Krishna. That was the first 10. To reject that which is unfavorable for Krishna's pleasure. Second 10. So, cultivation of devotional service. Sadhana bhakti. The method, the rules and regulation given by the spiritual master. And we explained how this is what diksha means. Initiation means receiving the method, the rules and regulations. Simply put, transcendental knowledge from the spiritual master. That's the actual diksha, the receiving of transcendental knowledge. And automatically then the detachment from the material selfishness, the illusion of this world, I'm the enjoyer, I'm the controller, that takes place automatically. Full detachment from anything but Krishna's devotional service, yukta vairagya. So, the activities, that's the first aspect of the essence. This is the essence of bhakti. The activities that are favorable, that's the second part. And the third is to whom? Krishna and nobody else. That was part of the problem with Garuda Purana's explanation. They said to the Lord and his expansions. But actually the most esoteric, perfect meaning is to Krishna. He is the fountainhead of all others. Etecham sakala pumsas. Krishna. All come from Krishna. Everyone comes from Krishna. And not just Krishna. The purport in explaining Krishna, Anushilanam, is that it also includes his devotees. Pure devotional service rendered to his devotees or to his paraphernalia. That's why I say, and I haven't had to do it the last couple of days, which is wonderful. You don't throw down the kartos or the instrument. It's Krishna's paraphernalia. It's worshipable. We had the opportunity to serve favorably and please Krishna by serving his paraphernalia properly. And then last but not least, the abodes, the dhams of the Lord. All those are included when we say Krishna. Now that is the, how do you say, lakshana? The main aspect of bhakti, those 3 items. And the subsidiary, or the secondary understanding of bhakti is that it has to be free of material desires, karma, gyan, etc. Or, in another way of putting it, Srila Prabhupada says that serving Krishna for his pleasure, that's most important. And the byproducts of the happiness we receive, or for that matter, the opulence, or the fame, or the facility, the disciples, etc., etc., etc. Those are all byproducts. And the pure devotees, they're not putting those in the forefront. In fact, the pure devotees aren't even considering desiring those things. That's us, the separatists. That's what brought us to devotional service. We had some desire to be free of misery, or we wanted some wealth, or possibly even inquisitive, or a combination of these. These are all karma mishra bhakti, or they turn into bhakti when we are given the association of devotees and the focus is on serve Krishna, and as more sinks into the dull brain for his pleasure, then the separatist mentality becomes purified. We become free of it gradually, slowly but surely, if we're embracing the process. If we engage in it with zeal, this is the kind of thing, Dravida Prabhu being the wordsmith. Srila Prabhupada, he said it in a negative context, but I'll quote it in a positive. He made a statement in a purport where he said, if the neophyte devotee does not engage in the cultivation of devotional service with zeal, then, and then it went on in the context of it, he can become a fallen devotee, an imitator devotee, sahaja, or completely fall away from devotional service. So I looked up zeal. We're meant to be engaging in these activities with zeal. It means to engage with enthusiasm and diligence, pursuance of a goal. What's our goal? Krishna prema. Uttama bhakti, Krishna prema. We should be doing so enthusiastically and with diligence. And then I looked up diligence. And it means to painstakingly pursue a desire, a goal. And one other, enthusiastically and painstakingly. So these words they have, like Dravida shared with us, what was the gloom? The word with S is more
Stygian.
Huh?
Stygian. Stygian is the word.
Stygian. An adjective for gloom. Dark.
It's from the Greek thing with the river Styx and running in the hell house.
Or pithy.
Pithy.
These words are so good. The English language is meat-eating culture's language, but at least we should try to understand it as it's used by the acharyas. They know how to use words in the service of Krishna, their only desire. Now let's elaborate. We said what the secondary thing was, the exclusion of the materialistic desires or the benefits that accrue from devotional service. That's the secondary stuff. The essence is prema. And the ecstasies are secondary. So, in explaining how it's the perfect uses of the word, he says that which is favorable to Krishna, that which pleases Krishna. And you can take, for example, so that you understand how it's perfect, Chanura. Do you know who Chanura was? He had a buddy named Mushtika. Has everyone heard this pastime?
Uh-huh.
It's when Krishna and Balaram and the cowherd boys, Nanda Maharaj, etc., left Vrindavan, went to Mathura to pay their taxes, and being invited by Akrura, the messenger of King Kamsa, and the motive behind King Kamsa's invitation is, I'm going to kill Krishna. First attempt, he had a giant elephant, Kubalapida. Well, he was dispatched.
You know what it means? Kubalapida?
Please.
The lotus crusher. River crusher.
He's trying to crush the lotus-like one, Krishna. That didn't work. Okay, well then come to the wrestling arena, the festival, in the big arena, and there my wrestlers will dispatch him. Krishna was a young boy. Young. In comparison to these big brutes of men, he's just a tiny, frail kid. But Chanura, when he was wrestling with Krishna and beating on his chest, Krishna loved it. He was getting immense pleasure from it. And a verse is given to substantiate this by Jiva Goswami, where he says, the Himalaya mountains are the, what's the exact word? He said, they're like the staff of the renunciate. They are the shelter of the renunciate. And they take great pleasure in the austerity of living in the caves of the Himalayas by themselves, etc. Just like a fighter, a warrior, will take pleasure when his opponent is giving him a good challenge. The blows and the striking of his opponent. A real Kshatriya or warrior, he doesn't want to push off. Who was it? Banasura or Bomasura? Which was Bana?
With the arms?
Yeah.
Banasura.
Banasura. 1,000 arms. He thought it was a great thing to ask for from Lord Shiva. Then really realized, I got no one to, there's no match for me. I can't fight anymore. It's just no challenge at all. Be like, one of these black belts, just, you try to do anything and you'd immediately be defeated with one move. So it was a curse, that's the stupidity of the separatist mentality. We think we're going to be happy by wanting something of this world, sense gratification of this world. But it's our curse. None of it makes us happy. By nature, we the living entities are happy. I saw something very interesting the other day. Some gentleman wrote a book about the happiest countries in the world. And he was saying most people think that happiness means to achieve some joyful state. Everybody's looking for happiness. But he intelligently understood, no, actually happiness really is the lack of, the absence of suffering. That's our definition of happiness in this material world. So you can't fault any of us for wanting to be happy. The fault lies in that we're trying to be happy outside of surrender to and service to Krishna for his pleasure. That's our great sin. That's our great misfortune. So Chinora was beating on Krishna and giving him pleasure, but is that pure devotional service? Is that favorable? No, because what was his motive? He was trying to kill him, not pleasing. And then you have the other extreme, where one might say, well, if Krishna's not pleased, is it possible to engage in pure devotional service? Can you do something that he's not pleased with and be doing pure devotional service? You think so?
No.
Actually, you can. And I will explain. The Acharyas explain. Mother Yasoda, when she put Krishna down to go tend to the milk that was boiling over, this was her special milk. They had cows that ate special grass, the most nutritious, best grass that Govardhan Hill has to offer. It was the creme de la creme milk that was to be offered to Krishna. She was breastfeeding baby Krishna. And to tend to the overflowing milk, she put him down. How did Krishna respond? Not very happily. He bit his lip with his little tiny teeth and began, "Wah! Feed me! I want your breast milk." He was not happy at all. But the Acharyas define the activities of Mother Yasoda in going to attend to the milk was pure devotional service because her intent was to please Krishna. This was the best of the milk to offer her son. I mean, he's going and stealing milk and milk products from my neighbors. I mean, my gosh, let me give him the best. Maybe he'll stop it. Maybe he'll be happy. Quit being such a rascal. So that's an example. You can do something that Krishna might not be pleased by, but if your intent is to please the Lord. And this helps us in understanding our differences amongst devotees in our movement, or even with other movements, Vaishnava movements, etc. If the intent is to please Krishna, then even if you don't agree with it or accept it, if their intent is to please Krishna, they're on the right track. And I won't say every time they are engaged in pure devotional service, with folded hands, I'll say an example would be like the Ritvik movement. They are trying to glorify Srila Prabhupada, but it's not really very appropriate glorification. Srila Prabhupada's glory is in, what did he say? I am repeating the message of my spiritual master in Bhagavad Gita as it is. I haven't changed one thing. Will you find anywhere in the scripture that once the spiritual master passes away that you can take diksha? We're not saying siksha, but diksha from such a person? You won't find it anywhere in Shastra. Would Srila Prabhupada give us one thing that is not to be backed up by Shastra? No. To say that he would is, in my opinion, in the opinion of most devotees of ISKCON, is no, that's not glorification. That's just one example. Srila Prabhupada in this purport talks about the Mayavadis who want to become one with the Lord. Don't be a separatist, be one with Krishna. Well, that's not devotion either. Even if their intent is not to please Krishna. Their intent is the most selfish and the most ignorant of all activities. To want to become one with Krishna is the greatest offense. It's in the mode of ignorance, Srila Prabhupada said in the purport, and most of them take animal birth as a result of the weight of their offensive mentality. Because they're offensive to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, if they're Brahmavadis and not Mayavadis, that's a whole other thing. That's the devotees under the Jnani, four kinds of pious people approach Krishna. The Jnani, who has understanding of transcendence, Brahman, etc. In the association of the devotees, he can get pure bhakti. He can surpass his piety and achieve bhakti. Strictly speaking, although Srila Prabhupada said this is a concept, it's an adulterated form of devotion, it's not devotion. I'll cite an example of that. Lord Chaitanya was on pilgrimage, and he was with one transcendentalist who was always chanting Ram. Ram, 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 Sita Ram, Sita Ram, Sita Ram. All day long, throughout the evening. Ram, 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 Ram. Lord Chaitanya didn't give him the time of day. Because you know what was in his heart? What was his motive? He wanted to become God. He wanted to become one with the Supreme. It's not bhakti at all. And if the the greatest amount of preponderance, if the preponderance of the desire is the separatist desire, the mentality, then you can get to a tipping point where it's not even considered Mishra Bhakti. Like there are two types of bhakti abhyas. There's pratibimba and there's abhyas. Pratibimba means a reflection of devotional service. And the example is given, the reflection of the tree on the water. Is the reflection connected to the tree? No, it's on the water. It doesn't actually contact the tree. There isn't a connection. It's a reflection, but it's not connected. Whereas a shadow, the shadow is connected to the object. So the abhyas, the shadow of devotion, that's what most of us have approached this movement with. The desire, we understand Krishna is God, let's serve Him. Our desire will become free of the miseries, we'll get to go back home to Godhead. That's tomorrow's verse. The desire to become free of sinful reactions, of ignorance, of going back to Godhead, getting liberation, that's Sattva Mishra Bhakti. But if you're putting the desire first and foremost, and there's just a tiny little, reference to Krishna, then it's not really even the Mishra Bhakti. It gets found, it's in the category of karma or jnana. And when the more you link it with Krishna, then it becomes karma yoga or jnana yoga. And when it begins to become greater in the sense of reciprocating with Krishna in service to Him, then it becomes Mishra Bhakti. This is technically defining things. Srila Prabhupada, in his kindness, Bhagavad Gita from page 1 to 790, whatever, it's all explained as pure bhakti. Just like this, all you do, all you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities you perform, should be done as an offering to me. How does Srila Prabhupada define that? That's pure devotional service. That's Krishna consciousness. Gosh, I should be so lucky. But that's described as niskama karma bhakti, karma yoga. Niskama karma yoga. You're giving up the fruits. You're simply trying to please Krishna. If you completely give up the attachment to the fruits of your desires and are simply attached to the service, just like Dr. Ryan shared with us a good tip, find something in Krishna consciousness that you super like to do. If you find that, then you will stick to it and you will do your best to improve in it, and your devotion will awaken. But that attachment to that particular type of activity, technically speaking, is this niskama karma yoga bhakti. And at some point, by the mercy of Krishna, because He's within the heart and the pure vibration of the acharya and coming through disciplic succession, it works. It is a gift, a blessing that is given to those who are so fortunate to simply become attached to some particular duty, service, activity for Krishna's pleasure. And once that gift is received, then pure devotion or pure faith, shraddha, the total conviction, complete conviction that I just want to serve Krishna and nothing else, that takes place, and that is the fertile ground from which pure bhakti develops. So, last but not least, example of the pratibimba bhakti, the reflection, when you are trying to worship demigods or anybody else, you're doing your Kali Kirtan, your Shiva Kirtan, this or that, bogus. It's called the Bhakti Fest, but without the devotees present, there is no bhakti. That kind of festival is like, with folded hands, I'm just quoting Bhagavatam, a festival of the crows. Or if we want to really speak harshly and strongly, like Srila Prabhupada would say, decorating a dead body. Now, if you understand they're the servants of the Lord, if you understand the relationship with Krishna, then you're getting somewhere. But anyway, in and of itself, approaching anyone but Krishna, like we said, Krishna Anashilana, Bhakti Uttama, then the mind's so faulty. As I said, start out in the negative sense. If you're approaching anyone but Krishna, then it's not bhakti. But if you're approaching in relationship to Krishna, then you can get somewhere, because Krishna likes to see his devotees worshipped, served, and pleased. But anyway, that understanding is lacking for most of those who have been misguided in this Kali Yuga, cheated by so-called spiritualists who haven't a clue as to what pure bhakti is. And I think I'll end in there because of the time. I'd love to continue, but are there any questions or comments on anything that's been shared?
Yeah.
Yes, Sir.
Maybe it's not appropriate since it refers to tomorrow's verse, but it's interesting, this word Pratikbhava, which Prabhupada says also, what is the other variation?
Bina.
Some Drik Bhava, there's two variations. At the beginning of the first word, today's verse, what he said?
He says Bina Drik.
Bina. It's also there in the next, in the supplement. The same word is used, although it's not in the translation. But it's, if your motive is not simply to please Krishna, but because you want to get liberation, that's also a separatist mentality. It's not pure devotion.
And we will keep it for tomorrow's discussion. I believe Hashigrami Prabhu will speak. But, there is a way in which one can have one's desire to go back home, back to God, and be rendering pure devotional service. We'll say that for tomorrow's conversation. Srila Prabhupada's given us the secret. Because sometimes people immaturely think, oh, I shouldn't desire to go back home to Godhead. That's the surefire recipe for staying in the material world. As Bhakti Tirtha Swami said, keep your eyes on the goal. That motivates us to do what we should. Any other? I missed you yesterday. Any thoughts today, Dr. Ryan? Wowzer. Zach? Mokunda?
I wasn't quite clear on the how you said that it's still possible for it to be pure devotional service if it's trying to be pleasing to Krishna, but it doesn't actually please Krishna. It can still be service. And with the milk example, I was thinking that that would still count as pure devotional service for Yashoda to put down Krishna. But I thought that still it's because ultimately it is pleasing to Krishna, even though he puts up a fight or he cries, but still like she's serving the devotee, the milk who's
it's nice to use the intelligence to try and understand what the acharyas have given us. Very nice. We should discuss these things threadbare. Even controversial subject matter, Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami says, because if you do it in the association of devotees with the context of the instructions of the spiritual master and the disciplic succession, then it will simply strengthen your Krishna consciousness. So to say that Krishna was only acting as if he was unhappy, no.
Okay.
He was angry. He was frustrated. Frustration leads to anger. And that spiritual, there's no material inebriety. Or inebriety. I don't know why my dull brain will not.
Because you learned it when you were early days in ISKCON. Everybody mispronounced that.
Inebriety, right? Inebriety.
In the fighting though, when Krishna fights, like you were saying with the wrestlers, and he's enjoying it. So he's like exhibiting his joy when he's enjoying it. It's not like he's like looks angry, but he's really enjoying it. He's actually showing the joy when he's
he was enjoying the wrestling.
But the wrestlers weren't performing pure devotion service.
No. We couldn't have got that.
Okay.
So, but I was trying to apply it so it's not just, let's not just be, parrots. There are times where, like Dr. Ryan and I have had a couple of discussions where, there's so many so-called takes on what Srila Prabhupada wants, right? On different subject matters. Can they all be wrong or can they all be right? Or, it's like the motive is the most important thing. That's the first thing. You always need to keep that in mind. Because that Srila Prabhupada really encouraged diversity in unity, or unity in diversity, however you want to say it. We're going to have differences of opinion, and we're going to have differences of emphasis. It's just the way it is. If I was in control, if I was in charge, like that. But anyway, the central point is, let's try and please Krishna. And how do we know how to do that? By following with full surrender the methods, the rules and regulations, the instructions of the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj srimadbhagavatam ki jai. Samaveda Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
Yeah, but it's a private version. Abhas is the word abhas is reflection. Abhyas is practice. Yeah, the Y in it, abhyas is A-B-H-Y-A-S-A is practice.
Okay, so I want to remember without a Y, abhas.
Yes.
Abhas, it's a good abhas. Namabhas.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Shuddhabhas. Thank you. Everyone should hear that if I was saying.
Oh, great. Good. Whole new world.
Yeah.
I need to wake up. Oh, that's what everything is. I mean, I've been through that where you can't figure out everything. I mean, you didn't have any glasses?
Suppose this thing's never going to be perfect.
Huh?
Last year.
The rope is, yeah, exactly. I have to keep adjusting this rope because it slackens, and then, like this morning, it was way too low. I felt like it was like some weird whack-a-mole game or something. But now it's too high, so because it just has to pop. I got that in New Zealand. It's so funny that it needs like forever. So beat up boy. I guess the comment a little about the organization. Yeah, he goes in there. I know, I don't know why they use rugby because of this board.
So he wasn't looking to hang out on the patio for the night show until. So he said, I'm just going to go stretch and then I might take some Maharaj's case of kids. And then, yeah, but this is going to just be breakfast in the patio. Would you like to have this?
Derek.
You met Mukunda? That's a friend?
Yeah, friends with Mukunda. He was one of the first devotees I met about 8 months ago. When, I first found out about ISKCON and Krishna.
Good association there, boy. Mukunda.
Yeah, Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Burrito time.
Burrito bliss.
Yay, Prabhu.
Can you give this to Srila Prabhupada?
It was already his yesterday.
That's Vishad. Huh? That's his Vishad.
Hello, Jagannath.
This is not class related. Thank you very much for the class. It was very good.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, so we have a unique position where we're serving people who serve devotees, right? So,
That's unique.
yeah. Well, it's the doctor that like helps the brahmacharis here. Always actually will start helping
The ashrams anymore.
their mother. Like,
Oh, I saw that ad.
Yeah.
You're going to stay with them?
Well, I'm gonna try, but it's
No, she's not here. They're picking her up.
congregational members?
Tell them,
I don't
material
know if
qualifications
the
are.
congregational members
Yeah,
are.
The admin in our
Like, Mom, I'm not gonna be able to do my PhD.
Yeah, I would assume so, because they said that they
It's permanent,
had
Mom, it's all material.
Maharaj over at their house before conversating together, so they're very familiar with everything.
our congregation.
Well,
Yeah. So how does one go about serving, knowing that you're like feeding them things that aren't?
Are you going to be asked to come to me? Oh, yeah,
so,
that's a
they
real
didn't
rough
like
one.
it.
Yeah, so
They said that as a vegetarian, they allow
My dad told us to. He was like, you were
They
coming
allow
out.
you to,
to strict vegetarian.
okay,
But the coffee
My mom
which
was
we drink
like,
in the morning,
Jesus is the only one.
I have to cook coffee
I
as
was
well.
like,
But
well,
as
he's
far
not
as
the
I
only
know,
one. There's
coffee
others.
is belongs
parents
to
don't
the
and it said that the coffee, tea, same thing, it's in the same bread, same
They think I'm totally crazy.
level of
Feed them for
interpretation,
shot.
basically.
Let's give them a shot.
Like,
To the Prabhupada, for those
Did
who
they say that?
visiting our guest
I've been
house
brainwashed
in Vrindavan, for example, he said, yes, they can have their tea cooked and they can honor that.
It's so offensive.
No, it's
So, you know, insofar as the smoke of the endeavor, the fault of the endeavor, that's very, very minor. It's not the end of the world on the coffee. But they're going to make you make the meat or not?
They want me to make it. So that's the question. Should I tell them
And that's what
that?
they.
Oh, it's dad.
Should I ask them
Like,
to cook themselves somehow? This
like,
coffee,
she
or
said she would
do I
sit
have to
outside,
ask
like,
them?
So you have to decide what your
fast
own
until she died. Like, the protest.
No,
Like, it sounds like my
or
parents, but like, it gives me
you know what
like,
that
no, my
would be
parents aren't that bad,
deal
but like,
breaker. Srila Prabhupada said in
Are
explaining
you, were
the
you
great
Christian?
austerities
Oh, no,
he
they're
underwent
atheists.
upon
they
coming to
just,
this
they're
country.
like not
One of
so
them
that
was
like,
he
make
said,
that
I
happen.
had food in your refrigerator that had meat in it.
Well, I mean, that's what we believe
Srila
too.
Prabhupada
The Chintia Beta Beta.
the only time you can hear
And it isn't easy.
No, they're just like,
served to
for sure.
guests.
We know we-
Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati.
Oh, 100.
Yeah, he came and visited their temple there in Mayapur, but he
You
had
have to submit to the system because the
Brahmins
system is
from
God.
Navadvip
You know.
city, Kali worshippers, cooked the
You
goat,
can agree the system's real.
and then it was served there at the Gaudiya Math
That
in
is a
his
watching system.
in the temple compound.
Believe in the government.
But it's pretty far-stretched trying to relate the two, the dignitary that would give, you know, recognition to mission
I
and
get communication for one thing.
and cooking for
No way. I'll
devotees
take
who
that.
haven't realized.
Take that over having eternal life or realizing the
In
self
most
one
devotees,
day.
that would be a deal breaker. So see
It's like,
if that is
I
your
don't know, man.
conviction that you don't
Yeah,
want
that's
to
just like-
engage in the, you know, the Prabhupada
far out.
understands as the conspiracy of killing the animal. Anyone who cooks the meat, delivers the meat, there's like 6, 7 conspirators. Not just the person who eats, but the person who sells, not just the person who butchers, who sells, who cooks, who delivers, they're all guilty of it. And so if that is something that you would not be able to tolerate, then tell them it's such. More likely than not, they would respect you as a devotee. There's no guarantee that they will accept because we made it.
I'm just so happy that this exists because of Christianity.
I think they already said that they're okay with you cooking your type of dishes.
For them.
Yeah.
Like, oh, so
I'm sure you
I
go,
refuse to
wow,
love God and like, I decide
Probably if they're
I want to be rascally
anywhere near pious,
or like if I
they'll
don't
taste
appreciate
it.
Yeah.
Be won over.
Jesus
It's
specifically.
not really that hard to give up.
Because it's not big enough to love just God anymore.
But if you're asking, no,
And if I can't do
it
that,
represents you to Prabhupada.
apparently
Probably
all loving God will send me to hell forever. Not just for a little bit.
It'd be like,
Learn a lesson and come back. No, it's
unless you're
forever.
starving, your fear of being thrown out on the street or this or that, you know, if things are that bleak, and that's the only way you can get some employment and some money to pay the bills. Then, you know, maybe you can make a case that you would know. It's like I thought of our friend Bhakti Bob. I should have tasted it, you know, in the past, he is so
That's now what an idol is. They don't even understand what the scriptures. They don't even understand what an idol is. It's not an idol.
drugs, and then I
That's
thought
God.
of Prabhupada
Like,
taking money from drug dealers, and how he said, if you don't give everything you make for the salad drugs and you're implicated.
That, like, what, how do they come? Oh, yeah, let's go protest Rocky Ultra on Sunday.
This is an ancient practice.
It's real. It's real.
I don't know.
That's one of the hopefully they don't
look like obvious,
the cow.
There's voracious eaters.
They look so angry.
Come to America.
Guys, read
But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Purport. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings, because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly, Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demonic persons, who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit, and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to re-establish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment also, there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Sri Krishna. This spirit is demonic, because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the Parampara disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity, but if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. Text 3. Sahevayam mayateja yoga prokta puratana bhaktosime sakacheti rahasyam yetaruttamam. That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend, and can therefore understand the transcendental mystery of this science. Purport. There are two classes of men, namely the devotee and the demon. The Lord selected Arjuna as the recipient of this great science, owing to his being a devotee of the Lord. But for the demon, it is not possible to understand this great mysterious science. There are a number of editions of this great book of knowledge. Some of them have commentaries by the devotees, and some of them have commentaries by the demons. Commentation by the devotees is real, whereas that of the demons is useless. Arjuna accepts Sri Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and any commentary on the Gita following in the footsteps of Arjuna is real devotional service to the cause of this great science. The demonic, however, do not accept Lord Krishna as he is. Instead, they concoct something about Krishna and mislead general readers from the path of Krishna's instructions. Here is a warning about such misleading paths. One should try to follow the disciplic succession from Arjuna, and thus be benefited by this great science of Srimad Gita. Text 4. Arjuna Vacha Aparam Bhavato Janma Param Janma Vivasvataha Akatameta Vijaniyam Samado Proktavaniti. Arjuna said, the sun god Vivasvan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? Purport. Arjuna is an accepted devotee of the Lord, so how could he not believe Krishna's words? The fact is that Arjuna is not inquiring for himself, but for those who do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or for the demons who do not like the idea that Krishna should be accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For them only, Arjuna inquires on this point, as if he were himself not aware of the Personality of Godhead, or Krishna. As it will be evident from the 10th chapter, Arjuna knew perfectly well that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the fountainhead of everything, and the last word in transcendence. Of course, Krishna also appeared as the son of Devaki on this earth. How Krishna remained the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, the eternal original person, is very difficult for an ordinary man to understand. Therefore, to clarify this point, Arjuna put this question before Krishna so that he himself could speak authoritatively. That Krishna is the supreme authority is accepted by the whole world, not only at present, but from time immemorial, and the demons alone reject him. Anyway, since Krishna is the authority accepted by all, Arjuna put this question before him in order that Krishna would describe himself without being depicted by the demons, who always try to distort him in a way understandable to the demons and their followers. It is necessary that everyone, for his own interest, know the science of Krishna. Therefore, when Krishna himself speaks about himself, it is auspicious for all the worlds. To the demons, such explanations by Krishna himself may appear to be strange, because the demons always study Krishna from their own standpoint. But those who are devotees heartily welcome the statements of Krishna when they are spoken by Krishna himself. The devotees will always worship such authoritative statements of Krishna, because they are always eager to know more and more about him. The atheists, who consider Krishna an ordinary man, may in this way come to know that Krishna is superhuman, that he is Satchidananda Vigraha, the eternal form of bliss and knowledge, that he is transcendental, and that he is above the domination of the modes of material nature and above the influence of time and space. A devotee of Krishna, like Arjuna, is undoubtedly above any misunderstanding of the transcendental position of Krishna. Arjuna's putting this question before the Lord is simply an attempt by the devotee to defy the atheistic attitude of persons who consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being, subject to the modes of material nature. Text 5. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Bahuni me vatitani janmani tavacharjuna Tanyaham Veda Sarvani Natvam Veta Parantapo. The personality of Godhead said, Many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. Purport. In the Brahma Samhita 5.33, we have information of many, many incarnations of the Lord. It is stated there, Advaitam achyutam anadam anantarupam adyam purana purusham navayovanam cha vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhakto govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person, absolute, infallible, without beginning. Although expanded into unlimited forms, he is still the same original, the oldest, and the person always appearing as a fresh youth. Such eternal, blissful, all-knowing forms of the Lord are usually misunderstood by the best Vedic scholars, but they are always manifest to pure, unalloyed devotees. It is also stated in Brahma Samhita 5.39, Ramadimudisakala niyamena tishtan nanavataram akarod bhuvaneshu kintu Krishnak sayang samabhavat paramak pamanyo govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who was always situated in various incarnations such as Rama, Nrsimha, and many sub-incarnations as well, but who is the original personality of Godhead known as Krishna, and who incarnates personally also. In the Vedas also it is said that the Lord, although one without a second, manifests himself in innumerable forms. He is like the Vaidurya stone, which changes color, yet still remains one. All those multi-forms are understood by the pure, unalloyed devotees, but not by a simple study of the Vedas. Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhakto. Devotees like Arjuna are constant companions of the Lord, and whenever the Lord incarnates, the associate devotees also incarnate in order to serve the Lord in different capacities. Arjuna is one of these devotees, and in this verse it is understood that some millions of years ago, when Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god Vivaswan, Arjuna, in a different capacity, was also present. But the difference between the Lord and Arjuna is that the Lord remembered the incident, whereas Arjuna could not remember. That is the difference between the part and parcel living entity and the Supreme Lord. Although Arjuna is addressed herein as the mighty hero who could subdue the enemies, he is unable to recall what had happened in his various past births. Therefore, a living entity, however great he may be in the material estimation, can never equal the Supreme Lord. Anyone who is a constant companion of the Lord is certainly a liberated person, but he cannot be equal to the Lord. The Lord is described in the Brahma Samhita as infallible, achyuta, which means that he never forgets himself, even though he is in material contact. Therefore, the Lord and the living entity can never be equal in all respects, even if the living entity is as liberated as Arjuna. Although Arjuna is a devotee of the Lord, he sometimes forgets the nature of the Lord. But by the divine grace, a devotee can at once understand the infallible condition of the Lord, whereas a non-devotee or a demon cannot understand this transcendental nature. Consequently, these descriptions in the Gita cannot be understood by demonic brains. Krishna remembered acts which were performed by him millions of years before, but Arjuna could not, despite the fact that both Krishna and Arjuna are eternal in nature. We may also note herein that a living entity forgets everything due to his change of body, but the Lord remembers because he does not change his Satchidananda body. He is Advaita, which means there is no distinction between his body and himself. Everything in relation to him is spirit, whereas the conditioned soul is different from his material body. And because the Lord's body and self are identical, his position is always different from that of the ordinary living entity, even when he descends to the material platform. The demons cannot adjust themselves to this transcendental nature of the Lord, which the Lord himself explains in the following verse. Text 6. Ajopi san navvyatma bhutanam isharopi san bhakatin sam adhishtaya sambhavamyatma mayaya. Although I am unborn, and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. Purport. The Lord has spoken about the peculiarity of his birth. Although he may appear like an ordinary person, he remembers everything of his many, many past births, whereas a common man cannot remember what he has done even a few hours before. If someone is asked what he did exactly at the same time one day earlier, it would be very difficult for a common man to answer immediately. He would surely have to dredge his memory to recall what he was doing exactly at the same time one day before. And yet, men often dare to claim to be God or Krishna. One should not be misled by such meaningless claims. Then again, the Lord explains his prakriti or his form. Prakriti means nature as well as sarup or one's own form. The Lord says that he appears in his own body. He does not change his body, as the common living entity changes from one body to another. The conditioned soul may have one kind of body in the present birth, but he has a different body in the next birth. In the material world, the living entity has no fixed body, but transmigrates from one body to another. The Lord, however, does not do so. Whenever he appears, he does so in the same original body by his internal potency. In other words, Krishna appears in this material world in his original eternal form, with two hands holding a flute. He appears exactly in his eternal body, uncontaminated by this material world. Although he appears in the same transcendental body and is Lord of the universe, it still appears that he takes his birth like an ordinary living entity. And although his body does not deteriorate like a material body, it still appears that Lord Krishna grows from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth. But, astonishingly enough, he never ages beyond youth. At the time of the Battle of Kurukshetra, he had many grandchildren at home. Or, in other words, he had sufficiently aged by material calculations. Still, he looked just like a young man 20 or 25 years old. We never see a picture of Krishna in old age because he never grows old like us, although he is the oldest person in the whole creation, past, present, and future. Neither his body nor his intelligence ever deteriorates or changes. Therefore, it is clear that in spite of his being in the material world, he is the same unborn, eternal form of bliss and knowledge, changeless in his transcendental body and intelligence. Factually, his appearance and disappearance are like the sun's rising, moving before us, and then disappearing from our eyesight. When the sun is out of sight, we think that the sun is set, and when the sun is before our eyes, we think that the sun is on the horizon. Actually, the sun is always in its fixed position, but owing to our defective, insufficient senses, we calculate the appearance and disappearance of the sun in the sky. And because Lord Krishna's appearance and disappearance are completely different from that of any ordinary common living entity, it is evident that he is eternal, blissful knowledge by his internal potency, and he is never contaminated by material nature. The Vedas also confirm that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unborn, yet he still appears to take his birth in multi-manifestations. The Vedic supplementary literatures also confirm that even though the Lord appears to be taking his birth, he is still without change of body. In the srimadbhagavatam, he appears before his mother as Narayan, with 4 hands and the decorations of the 6 kinds of opulences. His appearance in his original eternal form is his causeless mercy, bestowed upon the living entities so that they can concentrate on the Supreme Lord as he is, and not on mental concoctions or imaginations which the impersonalist wrongly thinks the Lord's forms to be. The word Maya, or Atma Maya, refers to the Lord's causeless mercy, according to the Vishvakosh dictionary. The Lord is conscious of all of his previous appearances and disappearances, but a common living entity forgets everything about his past body as soon as he gets another body. Krishna is the Lord of all living entities because he performs wonderful and superhuman activities while he is on this earth. Therefore, the Lord is always the same absolute truth and without differentiation between his form and self, or between his quality and body. A question may now be raised as to why the Lord appears and disappears in this world. This is explained in the next verse. Text 7. Yada yada hi dharmasya glani bhavati bharata abhyuttanam dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharat, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. Purport. The word Srijami is significant herein. Srijami cannot be used in the sense of creation, because, according to the previous verse, there is no creation of the Lord's form or body, since all of the forms are eternally existent. Therefore, Srijami means that the Lord manifests himself as he is. Although the Lord appears on schedule, namely at the end of the Dwapara Yuga of the 28th millennium of the 7th Manu in one day of Brahma, he has no obligation to adhere to such rules and regulations, because he is completely free to act in many ways at his will. He therefore appears by his own will whenever there is a predominance of irreligiosity and a disappearance of true religion. Principles of religion are laid down in the Vedas, and any discrepancy in the matter of properly executing the rules of the Vedas makes one irreligious. In the Bhagavatam it is stated that such principles are the laws of the Lord. Only the Lord can manufacture a system of religion. The Vedas are also accepted as originally spoken by the Lord himself to Brahma from within his heart. Therefore the principles of Dharma, or religion, are the direct orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Dharmam tu sakshad bhagavat pranitam. These principles are clearly indicated throughout the Bhagavad Gita. The purpose of the Vedas is to establish such principles under the order of the Supreme Lord, and the Lord directly orders at the end of the Gita that the highest principle of religion is to surrender unto Him only and nothing more. The Vedic principles push one toward complete surrender unto Him, and whenever such principles are disturbed by the demoniac, the Lord appears. From the Srimadbhagavatam we understand that Lord Buddha is the incarnation of Krishna who appeared when materialism was rampant and materialists were using the pretext of the authority of the Vedas. Although in the Vedas there are certain restrictive rules and regulations regarding animal sacrifice for particular purposes, people of demoniac tendencies still took animal sacrifice without reference to the Vedic principles. Lord Buddha appeared to stop this nonsense and to establish the Vedic principles of non-violence. Therefore, each and every avatar or incarnation of the Lord has a particular mission, and they are all described in the revealed scriptures. No one should be accepted as an avatar unless he is referred to by scriptures. It is not a fact that the Lord appears only on Indian soil. He can manifest himself anywhere and everywhere, and whenever he desires to appear. In each and every incarnation, he speaks as much about religion as can be understood by the particular people under their particular circumstances. But the mission is the same, to lead people to God consciousness and obedience to the principles of religion. Sometimes he descends personally, and sometimes he sends his bona fide representative in the form of his son or servant, or himself in some disguised form. The principles of the Bhagavad Gita were spoken to Arjuna, and for that matter to other highly elevated persons, because he was highly advanced compared to ordinary persons in other parts of the world. 2 + 2 = 4 is a mathematical principle that is true in the beginner's arithmetic class and in the advanced class as well. Still, there are higher and lower mathematics. In all incarnations of the Lord, therefore, the same principles are taught, but they appear to be higher and lower in varied circumstances. The higher principles of religion begin with the acceptance of the 4 orders and the 4 statuses of social life, as will be explained later. The whole purpose of the mission of incarnations is to arouse Krishna consciousness everywhere. Such consciousness is manifest and non-manifest only under different circumstances. Text 8. Paritranaya sadhunaham vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samstapanataya sambhavami yuge yuge. To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. Purport. According to Bhagavad Gita, a sadhu or holy man is a man in Krishna consciousness. A person may appear to be irreligious, but if he has the qualifications of Krishna consciousness wholly and fully, he is to be understood to be a sadhu. And dushkritam applies to those who do not care for Krishna consciousness. Such miscreants, or dushkritam, are described as foolish and the lowest of mankind, even though they may be decorated with mundane education, whereas a person who is 100% engaged in Krishna consciousness is accepted as a sadhu, even though such a person may be neither learned nor well-cultured. As far as the atheistic are concerned, it is not necessary for the Supreme Lord to appear as he is to destroy them, as he did with the demons Ravana and Kamsa. The Lord has many agents who are quite competent to vanquish demons. But the Lord especially descends to appease his unalloyed devotees, who are always harassed by the demoniac. The demon harasses the devotee, even though the latter may happen to be his kin. Although Prahlad Maharaj was the son of Hiranyakashipu, he was nonetheless persecuted by his father. Although Devaki, the mother of Krishna, was the sister of Kamsa, she and her husband Vasudeva were persecuted only because Krishna was to be born of them. So Lord Krishna appeared primarily to deliver Devaki rather than to kill Kamsa, but both were performed simultaneously. Therefore it is said here that to deliver the devotee and vanquish the demon miscreants, the Lord appears in different incarnations. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Krishnadas Kaviraj, the following verses, Madhya Lila 20, 263 to 264, summarize these principles of incarnation. Srishti hetu ye murti prapanche avatare, se Ishwar murti avatara nama dhare, mayatita paravyome sabara avastan, vishwe avatari dhare avatar nam. The avatar or incarnation of Godhead descends from the kingdom of God for material manifestation, and the particular form of the personality of Godhead who so descends is called an incarnation or avatar. Such incarnations are situated in the spiritual world, the kingdom of God. When they descend to the material creation, they assume the name avatar. There are various kinds of avatars, such as Purusha avatars, Guna avatars, Leela avatars, Shakyadesh avatars, Manvantara avatars, and Yuga avatars, all appearing on schedule all over the universe. But Lord Krishna is the primeval Lord, the fountainhead of all avatars. Lord Sri Krishna descends for the specific purpose of mitigating the anxieties of the pure devotees, who are very anxious to see him in his original Vrindavan pastimes. Therefore, the prime purpose of the Krishna avatar is to satisfy his unalloyed devotees. The Lord says that he incarnates himself in every millennium. This indicates that he incarnates also in the age of Kali. As stated in the srimadbhagavatam, the incarnation in the age of Kali is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who spread the worship of Krishna by the Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting of the holy names, and spread Krishna consciousness throughout India. He predicted that this culture of Sankirtan would be broadcast all over the world, from town to town and village to village. Lord Chaitanya, as the incarnation of Krishna, the personality of Godhead, is described secretly but not directly in the confidential parts of the revealed scriptures, such as the Upanishads, Mahabharata, and Bhagavatam. The devotees of Lord Krishna are very much attracted by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. This avatar of the Lord does not kill the miscreants, but delivers them by his causeless mercy. Text 9. Janma karmacha me divyam evam hyo veti tattvataha jaktva deham punar janma naiti mameti sojana. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Purport. The Lord's descent from his transcendental abode is already explained in the 6th verse. One who can understand the truth of the appearance of the personality of Godhead is already liberated from material bondage, and therefore he returns to the kingdom of God immediately after quitting his present material body. Such liberation of the living entity from material bondage is not at all easy. The impersonalists and the yogis attain liberation only after much trouble and many births. Even then, the liberation they achieve, merging into the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord, is only partial, and there is the risk of returning to this material world. But the devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body, and does not run the risk of returning to this material world. In the Brahma Samhita 5.33, it is stated that the Lord has many forms and incarnations. Advaitam Achrutam Anadim Anandarupam. Although there are many transcendental forms of the Lord, they are still one and the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. One has to understand this fact with conviction, although it is incomprehensible to mundane scholars and empiric philosophers. As stated in the Vedas, Purusha Bodhini Upanishad, Eko Devo Nityalila Anurakto Bhakta Vyapti Ridyantaratma. The one Supreme Personality of Godhead is eternally engaged in many transcendental forms in relationships with his unalloyed devotees. This Vedic version is confirmed in this verse of the Gita personally by the Lord. He who accepts this truth on the strength of the authority of the Vedas and of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and who does not waste time in philosophical speculations, attains the highest perfectional stage of liberation. Simply by accepting this truth on faith, one can, without a doubt, attain liberation. The Vedic version, Tat Tvamasi, is actually applied in this case. Anyone who understands Lord Krishna to be the Supreme, or who says unto the Lord, "You are the same Supreme Brahman, the personality of Godhead," is certainly liberated instantly, and consequently his entrance into the transcendental association of the Lord is guaranteed. In other words, such a faithful devotee of the Lord attains perfection, and this is confirmed by the following Vedic assertion. Tameva viditvati mrityumeti nanyak panta vidyate yanaya. One can attain the perfect stage of liberation from birth and death simply by knowing the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and there is no other way to achieve this perfection. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 3.8. That there is no alternative means that anyone who does not understand Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is surely in the mode of ignorance, and consequently he will not attain salvation simply, so to speak, by licking the outer surface of the bottle of honey, or by interpreting the Bhagavad Gita according to mundane scholarship. Such empiric philosophers may assume very important roles in the material world, but they are not necessarily eligible for liberation. Such puffed-up mundane scholars have to wait for the causeless mercy of the devotee of the Lord. One should therefore cultivate Krishna consciousness with faith and knowledge, and in this way attain perfection. Text 10. Vittaragam bhayakrodha manmayamamupashita bahavo jnana tapasa bhutaman bhavamagata. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me, and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Purport. As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person. Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep this same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal. And because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining their personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all. Being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation, they become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of all three stages of attachment to the material world: negligence of spiritual life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. To get free from these three stages of the material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of the devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of Godhead. According to Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1:4-15-16, the science of devotional service, Ado Shraddha Tataksaro Sango Tabhajanakriya Tato Nata Nivritti Syat Tato Nishta Ruchistata Ata Saktis Tato Bhavas Tatak Prema Bhyudanchati Sadhakanam Ayam Premna Bharum Bhavet Bhavikrama. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service, under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness in self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further toward attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations that result in void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. Text 11. Ye yata mam papadyante Tansataiva bhajamyaham Namavartna navartante Manushyak parta sarvashaham. As all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Purport. Everyone is searching for Krishna in the different aspects of his manifestations. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is partially realized in his impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence and as the all-pervading Supersoul dwelling within everything, including the particles of atoms. But Krishna is fully realized only by his pure devotees. Consequently, Krishna is the object of everyone's realization, and thus anyone and everyone is satisfied according to one's desire to have him. In the transcendental world also, Krishna reciprocates with his pure devotees in the transcendental attitude, just as the devotee wants him. One devotee may want Krishna as Supreme Master, another as his personal friend, another as his son, and still another as his lover. Krishna rewards all the devotees equally according to their different intensities of love for him. In the material world, the same reciprocations of feelings are there, and they are equally exchanged by the Lord with the different types of worshippers. The pure devotees both here and in the transcendental abode associate with him in person, and are able to render personal service to the Lord, and thus derive transcendental bliss in his loving service. As for those who are impersonalists, and who want to commit spiritual suicide by annihilating the individual existence of the living entity, Krishna helps also by absorbing them into his effulgence. Such impersonalists do not agree to accept the eternal, blissful personality of Godhead. Consequently, they cannot relish the bliss of transcendental personal service to the Lord, having extinguished their individuality. Some of them, who are not firmly situated even in the impersonal existence, return to this material field to exhibit their dormant desires for activities. They are not admitted into the spiritual planets, but they are again given a chance to act on the material planets. For those who are fruitive workers, the Lord awards the desired results of their prescribed duties, as the Yajneshwar, and those who are yogis seeking mystic powers are awarded such powers. In other words, everyone is dependent for success upon his mercy alone, and all kinds of spiritual processes are but different degrees of success on the same path. Unless, therefore, one comes to the highest perfection of Krishna consciousness, all attempts remain imperfect, as stated in the srimadbhagavatam 2.3.10. Akama sarva kamo va mukshakama hudaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Whether one is without desire, the condition of the devotees, or is desirous of all fruitive results, or is after liberation, one should with all efforts try to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead for complete perfection, culminating in Krishna consciousness. Text 12. Akankshanta karmanang siddhim yajamdehi yadevata chipram himanushe loke siddhir bhavati karmaja. Men in this world desire success in fruitive activities, and therefore they worship the demigods. Quickly, of course, men get results from fruitive work in this world. Purport. There is a great misconception about the gods or demigods of this material world, and men of less intelligence, although passing as great scholars, take these demigods to be various forms of the Supreme Lord. Actually, the demigods are not different forms of God, but they are God's different parts and parcels. God is one, and the parts and parcels are many. The Vedas say, Nityo Nityanaham, God is one. Ishvarak Parama Krishna, the Supreme God is one, Krishna, and the demigods are delegated with powers to manage this material world. These demigods are all living entities, Nityanam, with different grades of material power. They cannot be equal to the Supreme God, Narayan, Vishnu, or Krishna. Anyone who thinks that God and the demigods are on the same level is called an atheist or Pashandi. Even the great demigods like Brahma and Shiva cannot be compared to the Supreme Lord. In fact, the Lord is worshipped by demigods such as Brahma and Shiva. Shivavarin Chinutam. Yet curiously enough, there are many human leaders who are worshipped by foolish men under the misunderstanding of anthropomorphism or zoomorphism. Ihadevata denotes a powerful man or demigod of this material world. But Narayan, Vishnu or Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, does not belong to this world. He is above, or transcendental to, material creation. Even Sripad Shankaracharya, the leader of the impersonalists, maintains that Narayan, or Krishna, is beyond this material creation.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare Krishna
Chapter 4, Text 12, Purport, continued. However, foolish people, Rita Jnana, worship the demigods because they want immediate results. They get the results, but do not know that results so obtained are temporary and are meant for less intelligent persons. The intelligent person is in Krishna consciousness, and he has no need to worship the paltry demigods for some immediate temporary benefit. The demigods of this material world, as well as their worshippers, will vanish with the annihilation of this material world. The boons of the demigods are material and temporary. Both the material worlds and their inhabitants, including the demigods and their worshippers, are bubbles in the cosmic ocean. In this world, however, human society is mad after temporary things such as the material opulence of possessing land, family, and enjoyable paraphernalia. To achieve such temporary things, people worship the demigods or powerful men in human society. If a man gets some ministership in the government by worshipping a political leader, he considers that he has achieved a great boon. All of them are therefore kowtowing to the so-called leaders or big guns in order to achieve temporary boons, and they indeed achieve such things. Such foolish men are not interested in Krishna consciousness for the permanent solution to the hardships of material existence. They are all after sense enjoyment, and to get a little facility for sense enjoyment, they are attracted to worship empowered living entities known as demigods. This verse indicates that people are rarely interested in Krishna consciousness. They are mostly interested in material enjoyment, and therefore they worship some powerful living entity. Text 13. Chaturvanyam maya srishtam gunakarma vibhagasaha tasya kartaram apimam vidya kartaram avyayam. According to the three modes of material nature and the work associated with them, the four divisions of human society are created by me. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. Purport. The Lord is the creator of everything. Everything is born of Him, everything is sustained by Him, and everything, after annihilation, rests in Him. He is therefore the creator of the four divisions of the social order, beginning with the intelligent class of men, technically called Brahmins due to their being situated in the mode of goodness. Next is the administrative class, technically called the Kshatriyas due to their being situated in the mode of passion. The mercantile men, called the Vaishyas, are situated in the mixed modes of passion and ignorance, and the Shudras, or laborer class, are situated in the ignorant mode of material nature. In spite of His creating the four divisions of human society, Lord Krishna does not belong to any of these divisions, because He is not one of the conditioned souls, a section of whom form human society. Human society is similar to any other animal society, but to elevate men from the animal status, the above-mentioned divisions are created by the Lord for the systematic development of Krishna consciousness. The tendency of a particular man toward work is determined by the modes of material nature which he has acquired. Such symptoms of life, according to the different modes of material nature, are described in the 18th chapter of this book. A person in Krishna consciousness, however, is above even the Brahmins. Although Brahmins by quality are supposed to know about Brahman, the supreme absolute truth, most of them approach only the impersonal Brahman manifestation of Lord Krishna. But a man who transcends the limited knowledge of a Brahman and reaches the knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, becomes a person in Krishna consciousness, or in other words, a Vaishnava. Krishna consciousness includes knowledge of all different plenary expansions of Krishna, namely Ram, Nrsimha, Varaha, etc. And as Krishna is transcendental to this system of the four divisions of human society, a person in Krishna consciousness is also transcendental to all divisions of human society, whether we consider the divisions of community, nation, or species. Text 14. Namam karmani limpanti, name karma palespriha, iti mang yo bijanati, karma bir nasabadhyate. There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. Purport. As there are constitutional laws in the material world stating that the king can do no wrong, or that the king is not subject to the state laws, similarly, the Lord, although he is the creator of this material world, is not affected by the activities of the material world. He creates and remains aloof from the creation, whereas the living entities are entangled in the fruitive results of material activities because of their propensity for lording it over material resources. The proprietor of an establishment is not responsible for the right and wrong activities of the workers, but the workers are themselves responsible. The living entities are engaged in their respective activities of sense gratification, and these activities are not ordained by the Lord. For advancement of sense gratification, the living entities are engaged in the work of this world, and they aspire to heavenly happiness after death. The Lord, being full in himself, has no attraction for so-called heavenly happiness. The heavenly demigods are only his engaged servants. The proprietor never desires the low-grade happiness such as the workers may desire. He is aloof from the material actions and reactions. For example, the rains are not responsible for different types of vegetation that appear on the earth, although without such rains, there is no possibility of vegetative growth. Vedic Smriti confirms this fact as follows. Nimittamatram evaso Sijjanam sarga karmani badhana karani bhukta yato vai srijya shaktayaha. In the material creations, the Lord is only the supreme cause. The immediate cause is material nature, by which the cosmic manifestation is made visible. The created beings are of many varieties, such as the demigods, human beings, and lower animals, and all of them are subject to the reactions of their past good or bad activities. The Lord only gives them the proper facilities for such activities and the regulations of the modes of nature, but he is never responsible for their past and present activities. In the Vedanta Sutra 2.134, it is confirmed, Vaishamyanarghrinyena sapikshatvat. The Lord is never partial to any living entity. The living entity is responsible for his own acts. The Lord only gives him facilities, through the agency of material nature, the external energy. Anyone who is fully conversant with all the intricacies of this law of karma, or fruitive activities, does not become affected by the results of his activities. In other words, the person who understands this transcendental nature of the Lord is an experienced man in Krishna consciousness, and thus he is never subjected to the laws of karma. One who does not know the transcendental nature of the Lord, and who thinks that the activities of the Lord are aimed at fruitive results, as are the activities of the ordinary living entities, certainly becomes entangled himself in fruitive reactions. But one who knows the supreme truth is a liberated soul fixed in Krishna consciousness. Text 15. Evam gyatva kritam karma bhurvar api mumukshubhihi guru karmaiva tasmatvam bhurvai purvataram kritam. All the liberated souls in ancient times acted with this understanding of my transcendental nature. Therefore, you should perform your duty following in their footsteps. Purport. There are two classes of men. Some of them are full of polluted material things within their hearts, and some of them are materially free. Krishna consciousness is equally beneficial for both of these persons. Those who are full of dirty things can take to the line of Krishna consciousness for a gradual cleansing process, following the regulative principles of devotional service. Those who are already cleansed of the impurities may continue to act in the same Krishna consciousness so that others may follow their exemplary activities and thereby be benefited. Foolish persons or neophytes in Krishna consciousness often want to retire from activities without having knowledge of Krishna consciousness. Arjuna's desire to retire from activities on the battlefield was not approved by the Lord. One need only know how to act. To retire from the activities of Krishna consciousness and to sit aloof, making a show of Krishna consciousness, is less important than actually engaging in the field of activities for the sake of Krishna. Arjuna is here advised to act in Krishna consciousness, following in the footsteps of the Lord's previous disciples, such as the sun god Vivasvan, as mentioned herein before. The Supreme Lord knows all his past activities, as well as those of persons who acted in Krishna consciousness in the past. Therefore, he recommends the acts of the sun god, who learned this art from the Lord some millions of years before. All such students of Lord Krishna are mentioned here as past liberated persons engaged in the discharge of duties allotted by Krishna. Text 16. King karma kama karmiti kavayopyatra mohita tatte karma pravakshyami yagnatva mokshase shubhat. Even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. Purport. Action in Krishna consciousness has to be executed in accord with the examples of previous bona fide devotees. This is recommended in the 15th verse. Why such action should not be independent will be explained in the text to follow. To act in Krishna consciousness, one has to follow the leadership of authorized persons who are in a line of disciplic succession as explained in the beginning of this chapter. The system of Krishna consciousness was first narrated to the sun god. The sun god explained it to his son, Manu. Manu explained it to his son, Ikshwaku, and the system is current on this earth from that very remote time. Therefore, one has to follow in the footsteps of previous authorities in the line of disciplic succession. Otherwise, even the most intelligent men will be bewildered regarding the standard actions of Krishna consciousness. For this reason, the Lord decided to instruct Arjuna in Krishna consciousness directly. Because of the direct instruction of the Lord to Arjuna, anyone who follows in the footsteps of Arjuna is certainly not bewildered. It is said that one cannot ascertain the ways of religion simply by imperfect experimental knowledge. Actually, the principles of religion can only be laid down by the Lord himself. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. srimadbhagavatam 6.319. No one can manufacture a religious principle by imperfect speculation. One must follow in the footsteps of great authorities like Brahma, Shiva, Narada, Manu, the Kumaras, Kapila, Prahlad, Bhishma, Shukadev Goswami, Yamaraj, Janaka, and Bali Maharaj. By mental speculation, one cannot ascertain what is religion or self-realization. Therefore, out of causeless mercy to his devotees, the Lord explains directly to Arjuna what action is and what inaction is. Only action performed in Krishna consciousness can deliver a person from the entanglement of material existence. Text 17. Karmano yapi bodhavyam, bodhavyam chapi karmanaha, akarmanascha bodhavyam, ghana karmano gati. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. Purport. If one is serious about liberation from material bondage, one has to understand the distinctions between action, inaction, and unauthorized actions. One has to apply oneself to such an analysis of action, reaction, and perverted actions because it is a very difficult subject matter. To understand Krishna consciousness and action according to its modes, one has to learn one's relationship with the Supreme. That is, one who has learned perfectly knows that every living entity is an eternal servitor of the Lord, and that consequently one has to act in Krishna consciousness. The entire Bhagavad Gita is directed toward this conclusion. Any other conclusions against this consciousness and its attendant actions are vikarmas, or prohibited actions. To understand all this, one has to associate with authorities in Krishna consciousness and learn the secret from them. This is as good as learning from the Lord directly. Otherwise, even the most intelligent persons will be bewildered. Text 18. Karman nikamayak pasyed karmani chakarmaya sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukta krishna karma krit. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among men, and he is in the transcendental position, although engaged in all sorts of activities. Purport. A person acting in Krishna consciousness is naturally free from the bonds of karma. His activities are all performed for Krishna. Therefore, he does not enjoy or suffer any of the effects of work. Consequently, he is intelligent in human society, even though he is engaged in all sorts of activities for Krishna. Akarma means without reaction to work. The impersonalist ceases fruitive activities out of fear, so that the resultant action may not be a stumbling block on the path of self-realization. But the personalist knows rightly his position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he engages himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness. Because everything is done for Krishna, he enjoys only transcendental happiness in the discharge of this service. Those who are engaged in this process are known to be without desire for personal sense gratification. The sense of eternal servitorship to Krishna makes one immune to all sorts of reactionary elements of work. Text 19. Yasya sarve samarambaha kama sankalpa varjita jnanagni dagna karmanam tamahu panditam buddha. One is understood to be in full knowledge whose every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions of work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. Purport. Only a person in full knowledge can understand the activities of a person in Krishna consciousness. Because the person in Krishna consciousness is devoid of all kinds of sense gratificatory propensities, it is to be understood that he has burned up the reactions of his work by perfect knowledge of his constitutional position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is actually learned who has attained to such perfection of knowledge. Development of this knowledge of eternal servitorship to the Lord is compared to fire. Such a fire, once kindled, can burn up all kinds of reactions to work. Text 20. Jaktva karma palasangam nitya tripto nirashayah karmam nabhipavrittopi naiva kinchit karoti sa. Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. Purport. This freedom from the bondage of actions is possible only in Krishna consciousness, when one is doing everything for Krishna. A Krishna-conscious person acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he has no attraction for the results of the action. He is not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in his possession. He does his duty to the best of his ability and leaves everything to Krishna. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. It is as though he were not doing anything. This is the sign of akarma, or actions without fruit of reactions. Any other action, therefore, devoid of Krishna consciousness, is binding upon the worker, and that is the real aspect of vikarma as explained hereinbefore. Text 21. Nirashiyat chittatma chaktasava parigraha shariram kevalam karma govannapnoti kilbisham. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. Purport. A Krishna-conscious person does not expect good or bad results in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that because he is part and parcel of the Supreme, the part played by him, as a part and parcel of the whole, is not his own activity, but is only being done through him by the Supreme. When the hand moves, it does not move out of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. A Krishna-conscious person is always dovetailed with the supreme desire, for he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly like a part of a machine. As a machine part requires oiling and cleaning for maintenance, so a Krishna-conscious man maintains himself by his work, just to remain fit for action in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. He is therefore immune to all the reactions of his endeavors. Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. A cruel proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession, yet the animal does not protest. Nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna-conscious person, fully engaged in self-realization, has very little time to falsely possess any material object. For maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not, therefore, become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his actions. Text 22. Yadricha santushto gundvatito vimatsaraha samak siddhava siddhocha kritvapi nanibadyate. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. Purport. A Krishna-conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He neither begs nor borrows, but he labors honestly as far as is in his power, and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. He is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna-conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady both in success and in failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge. Text 23. Agatasangasya muktasya jnanavastita chetasa yagyaya charata karma samagram pravaliyate. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Purport. Becoming fully Krishna-conscious, one is freed from all dualities and thus is freed from the contaminations of the material modes. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna, and thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. Consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices, because sacrifice aims at satisfying the Supreme Person, Vishnu, or Krishna. The resultant reactions to all such work certainly merge into transcendence, and one does not suffer material effects. Text 24. Brahmapanam brahmahavir brahmagno brahmanahutam brahmaivatena gantavyam brahmakarma samadhina. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Purport. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul, entangled in material contamination, is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness, or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. The word Brahma, Brahman, means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma Jyoti, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahma Jyoti. But when the Jyoti is covered by illusion, Maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are, all combined together, Brahman, or the Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the Absolute Truth, regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the Absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything, becomes one in the Absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. Text 25. Daivamevapare yagyam yoginak parhyupasate brahmagnavapare yagyam yajnaivopajuvati. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Purport. As described above, a person engaged in discharging duties in Krishna consciousness is also called a perfect yogi or a first-class mystic. But there are others also who perform similar sacrifices in the worship of demigods, and still others who sacrifice to the Supreme Brahman or the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord. So there are different kinds of sacrifices in terms of different categories. Such different categories of sacrifice by different types of performers only superficially demark varieties of sacrifice. Factually, sacrifice means to satisfy the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, who is also known as Yajna. All the different varieties of sacrifice can be placed within two primary divisions, namely, sacrifice of worldly possessions and sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. Those who are in Krishna consciousness sacrifice all material possessions for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, while others, who want some temporary material happiness, sacrifice their material possessions to satisfy demigods such as Indra, the sun god, etc. And others, who are impersonalists, sacrifice their identity by merging into the existence of impersonal Brahman. The demigods are powerful living entities appointed by the Supreme Lord for the maintenance and supervision of all material functions, like the heating, watering, and lighting of the universe. Those who are interested in material benefits worship the demigods by various sacrifices according to the Vedic rituals. They are called Bhav-Ishvaravadi, or believers in many gods. But others, who worship the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth, and regard the forms of the demigods as temporary, sacrifice their individual selves in the supreme fire, and thus end their individual existences by merging into the existence of the Supreme. Such impersonalists sacrifice their time in philosophical speculation to understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme. In other words, the fruitive workers sacrifice their material possessions for material enjoyment, whereas the impersonalist sacrifices his material designations with a view to merging into the existence of the Supreme. For the impersonalist, the fire altar of sacrifice is the Supreme Brahman, and the offering is the self being consumed by the fire of Brahman. The Krishna-conscious person, like Arjuna, however, sacrifices everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus all his material possessions, as well as his own self, everything, is sacrificed for Krishna. Thus he is the first-class yogi, but he does not lose his individual existence. Text 26. Shrotradim-indriyanyanye sanhyamagnishu juvati shabdadim vishayananya indriyagnishu juvati. Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control, and others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. Purport. The members of the four divisions of human life, namely the brahmachari, the grahastha, the vanaprastha, and the sannyasi, are all meant to become perfect yogis or transcendentalists. Since human life is not meant for our enjoying sense gratification like the animals, the four orders of human life are so arranged that one may become perfect in spiritual life. The brahmacharis, or students under the care of a bona fide spiritual master, control the mind by abstaining from sense gratification. A brahmachari hears only words concerning Krishna consciousness. Hearing is the basic principle for understanding, and therefore the pure brahmachari engages fully in Harir Namanakirtanam, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. He restrains himself from the vibrations of material sounds, and his hearing is engaged in the transcendental sound vibration of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Similarly, the householders who have some license for sense gratification perform such acts with great restraint. Sex life, intoxication, and meat-eating are general tendencies of human society, but a regulated householder does not indulge in unrestricted sex life and other sense gratification. Marriage in the principles of religious life is therefore current in all civilized human society, because that is the way for restricted sex life. This restricted, unattached sex life is also a kind of yajna, because the restricted householder sacrifices his general tendency toward sense gratification for higher transcendental life. Text 27. Savanindriya karmani dhana karmani chapare atma sangyama yogagno juvati jnana dipite. Others, who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses, offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. Purport. The yoga system conceived by Patanjali is referred to herein. In the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the soul is called Pratyagatma and Paragatma. As long as the soul is attached to sense enjoyment, it is called Paragatma. But as soon as the same soul becomes detached from such sense enjoyment, it is called Pratyagatma. The soul is subjected to the functions of 10 kinds of air at work within the body, and this is perceived through the breathing system. The Patanjali system of yoga instructs one on how to control the functions of the body's air in a technical manner, so so that ultimately all the functions of the air within become favorable for purifying the soul of material attachment. According to this yoga system, Pratyagatma is the ultimate goal. This Pratyagatma is withdrawn from activities in matter. The senses interact with the sense objects, like the ear for hearing, eyes for seeing, nose for smelling, tongue for tasting, and hand for touching. And all of them are thus engaged in activities outside the self. They are called the functions of the prana vayu. The apana vayu goes downwards. Dhyana vayu acts to shrink and expand. Samana vayu adjusts equilibrium. Udana vayu goes upwards. And when one is enlightened, one engages all these in searching for self-realization. Text 28. Dravya yagyastapo yagya, yoga yagyastapari, svadhyaya jnana yagyascha, yatayak sanksitavrata. Having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing severe austerities, by practicing the yoga of eightfold mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. Purport. These sacrifices may be fitted into various divisions. There are persons who are sacrificing their possessions in the form of various kinds of charities. In India, the rich mercantile community, or princely orders, open various kinds of charitable institutions like Dharmashala, Annakshetra, Atiti Shala, Anathalaya, and Vidyapit. In other countries, too, there are many hospitals, old age homes, and similar charitable foundations meant for distributing food, education, and medical treatment free to the poor. All these charitable activities are called Dravyamaya Yajna. There are others who, for higher elevation in life or for promotion to higher planets within the universe, voluntarily accept many kinds of austerities such as Chandrayana and Chaturmasya. These processes entail severe vows for conducting life under certain rigid rules. For example, under the Chaturmasya vow, the candidate does not shave for 4 months during the year, July to October. He does not eat certain foods, does not eat twice in a day, or does not leave home. Such sacrifice of the comforts of life is called Tapomaya Yajna. There are still others who engage themselves in different kinds of mystic yoga, like the Patanjali system, for merging into the existence of the Absolute, or Hatha Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga, for the particular perfections. And some travel to all the sanctified places of pilgrimage. All these practices are called Yoga Yajna, sacrifice for a certain type of perfection in the material world. There are others who engage themselves in the studies of different Vedic literatures, specifically the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutras, or the Sankhya philosophy. All of these are called Svadhyaya Yajna, or engagement in the sacrifice of studies. All these yogis are faithfully engaged in different types of sacrifice and are seeking a higher status of life. Krishna consciousness, however, is different from these because it is the direct service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness cannot be attained by any of the above-mentioned types of sacrifice, but can be attained only by the mercy of the Lord and His bona fide devotees. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is transcendental. Text 29. Apanin jumvati pranam, pranit panam tatapare, pranapanakati rudnva, pranayama parayana, apare niyatahara, pranam pranesha juvati. Still others, who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance, practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming, and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others, curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. Purport. This system of yoga for controlling the breathing process is called pranayama, and in the beginning it is practiced in the Hatha Yoga system through different sitting postures. All of these processes are recommended for controlling the senses and for advancement in spiritual realization. This practice involves controlling the airs within the body so as to reverse the directions of their passage. The apana air goes downward, and the prana air goes up. The pranayama yogi practices breathing the opposite way until the currents are neutralized into puraka equilibrium. Offering the exhaled breath into the inhaled breath is called rechaka. When both air currents are completely stopped, one is said to be in kumbhaka yoga. By practice of kumbhaka yoga, one can increase the duration of life for perfection in spiritual realization. The intelligent yogi is interested in attaining perfection in one life, without waiting for the next. For by practicing kumbhaka yoga, the yogis increase the duration of life by many, many years. A Krishna-conscious person, however, being always situated in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, automatically becomes the controller of the senses. His senses, being always engaged in the service of Krishna, have no chance of becoming otherwise engaged. So, at the end of life, he is naturally transferred to the transcendental plane of Lord Krishna. Consequently, he makes no attempt to increase his longevity. He is at once raised to the platform of liberation, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mancha yoga vicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord transcends the modes of material nature and is immediately elevated to the spiritual platform. A Krishna-conscious person begins from the transcendental stage, and he is constantly in that consciousness. Therefore, there is no falling down, and ultimately he enters into the abode of the Lord without delay. The practice of reduced eating is automatically done when one eats only Krishna prasadam, or food which is offered first to the Lord. Reducing the eating process is very helpful in the matter of sense control, and without sense control there is no possibility of getting out of the material entanglement. Text 30. Sarvepyete yagya vido yagya chapata kalmasha yagya shishtam vidabujo yanti brahma sanatanam. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions, and, having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices, they advance toward the supreme eternal atmosphere. Purport. From the foregoing explanation of different types of sacrifice, namely sacrifice of one's possessions, study of the Vedas or philosophical doctrines, and performance of the yoga system, it is found that the common aim of all is to control the senses. Sense gratification is the root cause of material existence. Therefore, unless and until one is situated on a platform apart from sense gratification, there is no chance of being elevated to the eternal platform of full knowledge, full bliss, and full life. This platform is in the eternal atmosphere, or Brahman atmosphere. All the above-mentioned sacrifices help one to become cleansed of the sinful reactions of material existence. By this advancement in life, not only does one become happy and opulent in this life, but also at the end he enters into the eternal kingdom of God, either merging into the impersonal Brahman or associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Text 31. Nayam lokostya yagyasya kutonyak kurusattama. O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next? Purport. Whatever form of material existence one is invariably ignorant of his real situation. In other words, existence in the material world is due to the multiple reactions to our sinful lives. Ignorance is the cause of sinful life, and sinful life is the cause of one's dragging on in material existence. The human form of life is the only loophole by which one may get out of this entanglement. The Vedas, therefore, give us a chance for escape by pointing out the paths of religion, economic comfort, regulated sense gratification, and, at last, the means to get out of the miserable condition entirely. The path of religion, or the different kinds of sacrifice recommended above, automatically solves our economic problems. By performance of yajna, we can have enough food, enough milk, etc., even if there is a so-called increase of population. When the body is fully supplied, naturally the next stage is to satisfy the senses. The Vedas prescribe, therefore, sacred marriage for regulated sense gratification. Thereby one is gradually elevated to the platform of release from material bondage, and the highest perfection of liberated life is to associate with the Supreme Lord. Perfection is achieved by performance of yajna, sacrifice, as described above. Now, if a person is not inclined to perform yajna according to the Vedas, how can he expect a happy life even in this body? And what to speak of another body on another planet? There are different grades of material comforts in different heavenly planets, and in all cases there is immense happiness for persons engaged in different kinds of yajna. But the highest kind of happiness that a man can achieve is to be promoted to the spiritual planets by practice of Krishna consciousness. A life of Krishna consciousness is therefore the solution to all the problems of material existence. Text 32. Evam bahuvada yajna vitata brahmano mukhe karmajan vidvitan sarvam evam gatva vimokshase. All these different types of sacrifice are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated. Purport. Different types of sacrifice, as discussed above, are mentioned in the Vedas to suit the different types of worker. Because men are so deeply absorbed in the bodily concept, these sacrifices are so arranged that one can work either with the body, with the mind, or with the intelligence. But all of them are recommended for ultimately bringing about liberation from the body. This is confirmed by the Lord herewith from his own mouth. Text 33. Shreyan javamaya jagya jnana yagya parantapo sarvam karma kilam pata jnane parisamapyate. O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pritha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. Purport. The purpose of all sacrifices is to arrive at the status of complete knowledge, then to gain release from material miseries, and ultimately to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord, Krishna consciousness. Nonetheless, there is a mystery about all these different activities of sacrifice, and one should know this mystery. Sacrifices sometimes take different forms according to the particular faith of the performer. When one's faith reaches the stage of transcendental knowledge, the performer of sacrifices should be considered more advanced than those who simply sacrifice material possessions without such knowledge. For without attainment of knowledge, sacrifices remain on the material platform and bestow no spiritual benefit. Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. Without the elevation of knowledge, sacrifices are simply material activities. When, however, they are elevated to the level of transcendental knowledge, all such activities enter onto the spiritual platform. Depending on differences in consciousness, sacrificial activities are sometimes called karma kanda, fruitive activities, and sometimes jnana kanda, knowledge in the pursuit of truth. It is better when the end is knowledge. Text 34. Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena seveya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Purport. The path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord himself. No one can be a bona fide spiritual master without following this principle of disciplic succession. The Lord is the original spiritual master, and a person in the disciplic succession can convey the message of the Lord as it is to his disciple. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is the fashion of the foolish pretenders. The Bhagavatam 6.3.19 says, Dharmam tu sakshad bhagavat pranijitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path. Nor by independent study of books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant, without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitute the proper combination for spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of the spiritual master, and when he sees the genuine desire of the disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. Not only should one hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. A bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind toward the disciple. Therefore, when the student is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiries becomes perfect. Text 35. Yagngatva na punarmoham evam yasasi pandava yen bhutan nisheshani drakshyasyatman yato mayi. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. For by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or, in other words, that they are mine. Purport. The result of receiving knowledge from a self-realized soul, or one who knows things as they are, is learning that all living beings are parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. The sense of an existence separate from Krishna is called Maya. Ma, not, Ya, this. Some think that we have nothing to do with Krishna, that Krishna is only a great historical personality, and that the Absolute is the impersonal Brahman. Factually, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, this impersonal Brahman is the personal effulgence of Krishna. Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the cause of everything. In the Brahma Samhita, it is clearly stated that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cause of all causes. Even the millions of incarnations are only his different expansions. Similarly, the living entities are also expansions of Krishna. The Mayavadi philosophers wrongly think that Krishna loses his own separate existence in his many expansions. This thought is material in nature. We have experience in the material world that a thing, when fragmentally distributed, loses its own original identity. But the Mayavadi philosophers fail to understand that absolute means that 1 plus 1 is equal to 1, and that 1 minus 1 is also equal to 1. This is the case in the absolute world. For want of sufficient knowledge in the absolute science, we are now covered with illusion, and therefore we think that we are separate from Krishna. Although we are separated parts of Krishna, we are nevertheless not different from him. The bodily difference of the living entities is maya, or not actual fact. We are all meant to satisfy Krishna. By maya alone, Arjuna thought that the temporary bodily relationship with his kinsman was more important than his eternal spiritual relationship with Krishna. The whole teaching of the Gita is targeted toward this end, that a living being, as Krishna's eternal servitor, cannot be separated from Krishna, and his sense of being an identity apart from Krishna is called maya. The living entities, as separate parts and parcels of the Supreme, have a purpose to fulfill. Having forgotten that purpose since time immemorial, they are situated in different bodies as men, animals, demigods, etc. Such bodily differences arise from forgetfulness of the transcendental service of the Lord. But when one is engaged in transcendental service through Krishna consciousness, one becomes at once liberated from this illusion. One can acquire such pure knowledge only from the bona fide spiritual master, and thereby avoid the delusion that the living entity is equal to Krishna. Perfect knowledge is that the Supreme Soul, Krishna, is the supreme shelter for all living entities. And giving up such shelter, the living entities are deluded by the material energy, imagining themselves